Hoselines used in the Alpha Fire Company. It's going to be a big part of your engine Pert program. So there are many hose lines, lays, and various hose bundles used within the department. They're not specific to the Alpha Fire Company, so most of these you're going to see again in your basic training. But this is what has worked best for our department. The members of the company will be trained, or you will be trained on packing and the deployment of each of these hose lines and their configuration as they're stored and then deployed off the apparatus. Though you'll be trained in packing and deployment of Alpha Fire Company hose loads, does not mean to be anything different than what you may have seen in your home department, as I said before. In addition, there are other ways to deploy these hose loads. This is what we've chosen within the Alpha Fire Company, works best for us. So a few different topics we're gonna review. Different types of hose loads, the care and maintenance of the hose loads or the hose lines, and then which hose lines are used specific to the Alpha Fire Company and where they're found at on the apparatus. So with hose lines, the term hose line just refers to or identifies a type of flexible hose used for firefighting. This hose line is used to carry the water from the pressurized water source to the fire engine. It may also be used to carry the water from the fire engine to the nozzle or to wherever it's being used at, actually at the fire. So you need to understand that each hose line is used for a specific purpose. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, the large 5-inch hose line you've used before in your water supply program. That's used to move a bulk amount of water from the water supply into the fire apparatus. That's going to hold true to also the 3-inch hose. So either 5-inch or 3-inch can also be used for supply hose. When you move down to 2.5-inch hose, that gets you into a tack hose. And generally 2.5, inch and a half, inch and 3/4, or anything smaller than 2.5 or smaller is used as a tack hose. Anything that is 3 inches or larger is used as a supply hose. Okay, so each hose line on the apparatus does have its own purpose. So generally, hoses are going to be cut into either 50, 75, or 100 feet lengths. Okay, so you see on the slide there, it doesn't say anything about 75-foot sections, but you're going to find within the Alpha Fire Company, we do also have 75-foot sections. Most of our hose, as I said before, if it's going to be a tack hose is either going to be 2.5-inch hose, or it's going to be 1 3/4 hose. Now, understand at one point in the fire service, or even some places still use 1.5-inch fire hose, and some places 1 3/4. Both 1.5-inch and 1 3/4 hose lines still use an 1.5-inch coupler. So don't be, if you're working with another department or, somehow a piece of hose gets mixed into the mix of the hose load, it is possible to have 1.5-inch and 1 3/4 hose in the same hose stack because, as I said before, they both use an 1.5-inch coupling. Soft sleeve hoses can be used for an intake hose. So I'd refer to the soft sleeve hose as what you'll find on the front bumper of the engines, at least engines 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3. That has both a 6-inch female thread, and then I believe it has a 4 or 4.5-inch female thread also. So one side connects to the apparatus, and the other side is going to connect to the fire hydrant. Okay, so if we hear a soft sleeve, we're talking about an intake hose. So going back to my supply hose I did briefly talk about. All right, I already touched on this. Supply hose is generally 3 inches in diameter or larger. Could either be soft sleeve hose, okay, which would be the pressurized water source from the fire hydrant to the pump intake. That soft sleeve hose will be found on the front bumper. We have hard suction hose. This is also referred to as a hard bar, at least that's a term used in the Alpha Fire Company. The hard suction hoses are used primarily to draft water from an open water source. This is something you would have went over in the water supply program. Supply lines are large diameter hose. So your 3-inch supply line is a leader line or a standpipe. That's going to be the blue hose. This 3-inch supply line can be used for filling tankers, supplying other engines, supplying a master stream device. The big difference between a 3-inch hose and a 2.5-inch hose is the gallons per minute it flows. So a 3-inch line will run or flow roughly 500 gallons a minute. When you step down to a 2.5-inch hose, you're going to get about 250 gallons a minute. And those are just rough numbers. A tack hose, as I've already spoke about briefly, a tack hose is going to be the smaller hose, so anything 2.5 inches or lower. For us, it's going to be the 1 3/4 attack lines, generally flowing 150 gallons a minute with the nozzles that we have. We do also have a smaller pencil line, or you think about it as a pencil line or something like a garden hose. And then if you work with the SRU5, our small brush truck, I believe that also has a 1-inch hose on the back on a hose reel. So understand that we have both large diameter supply hoses, and then we have small attack lines, and we have some larger attack lines. So understand that there's a multitude of different hoses and different sizes on our apparatus, and you'll go over each of these during your hands-on operations or hands-on practical training. So how is fire hose constructed? So throughout the years, they've been constructed of many different materials. So you'll see on this slide here, I believe the top one's using more of a rubber or a booster hose, so 1.5 inches or 1/2 inch up to 1 inch, using more of a rubber design. And then when you move down that list there, you'll see that some have a woven jacket from 1 inch to 6 inch, impregnated single jacket hose. There's hose that has a double jacket. You'll see some of the hose that it's wire bound. So if it just gives that some rigidity, so that hose can be used for a drafting operation. The hoses that do not have the wire bound to them are used as a pressurized source. So your attack line is much more flexible. It doesn't have the wire. That's used as a pressurized source. For your hard bars or your drafting hose or your suction hose, whatever you want to refer to it as, they have the wire bound to them, and that's used that you can pull a vacuum on it or subject it to negative pressure. But with that wire bound on the outside of it keeps it from collapsing if you reduce the pressure inside the hose. Okay, so that's one of the biggest differences between the two types of hose will be this construction and also its makeup, or the materials used, or the design of those materials. So next we're going to talk about the couplers. If we're working with a threaded coupler, you're going to see that you may hear your instructor, you should hear your instructor talk about a Higby cut. The Higby cut is an indication of where the threads start. If you look on the left side of the slide, the small picture there, the left side, it has the male threads. You see the Higby cut is indicating the start of the threads. Also, you'll see a Higby or an indicator there on the collar of the coupler. On the right side, that would be the female side of the hose line. Again, there is an indication, a Higby indicator on the coupler on the lug of the coupler, and that also indicates where the threads start. So if you line up both of those Higby indicators, you're going to be placing the start of each of the threads at the same point, and it will assist you in coupling the hose lines together. Okay, so this is used for threaded hoses, which would be our attack lines. So the 3-inch hose we have uses threaded, the 2.5 uses a threaded coupler. The 1-inch hose also uses a threaded coupler. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about, or I'm not sure if it's the next thing, will also be the storage connection. So you'll find on the 5-inch hose. The 5-inch hose has a universal or a sexless connection. That's referred to as the storage connection. And if you've worked with this already, whenever you worked with the 5-inch lines during the practical training for water supply. So with hose lines, we need to think about how these may be damaged. The damage may come from mechanical damage, some sort of thermal damage, organic damage, and then also chemical damage. So different types of mechanical damage. Could be worn areas, rips, abrasions. It could be crushed for some reason, or you might have damaged couplers. A big thing with couplers is please do not drop the couplers on the ground. Okay, or also do not drag the couplers across the ground. There are a few options you have as far as, if the coupler is close to the ground, instead of letting it drop in the ground, lay it on the ground. If you're rolling a hose line, instead of dragging the coupler across the ground, make a fold in it, lay it back on top of the jacket of the hose, and that's going to protect that coupler from being dragged or being scraped across the ground. Okay, so if you damage the coupler, you're not going to be able to put two pieces of hose together. If you can't put two pieces of hose together, then that hose is going to be out of service. Mechanical damage for hose lines may also come from a stress on the hose line, and that's what I'm going to refer to as, if you're going to open and close a nozzle, please open and close the nozzle slowly. If you're going to open and close a hydrant, also open and close that hydrant slowly. You want to avoid the water hammer. You want to avoid that slug of water. You want to avoid the overpressure of the hose line or a sudden increase of pressure within the hose line. Whenever you're repacking hoses, so you're going to find that our hose comes off, it gets used when it goes back on. It's very common for the bends to be in the same position. You may hear some departments refer to as flipping a hose bed, or whenever they repack the hose, they may change the length of the hose bed just slightly. The reason for that is just change where the bends end up in the hose line, so the hose is not always bent at the same position all the time. Thermal damage. This may be caused by excessive heat or exposing the hose line to heat. This may occur during the actual fireground operations, so you're stretching the hose line into a building, and it may be up against a hot area. It may just be in the fire room during your operations. The other thing you need to think about is charring or melt. So if you're working in an area, let's say you're hooking the ceiling, you're pulling the ceiling, you're opening up, you're doing some sort of overhaul, which is looking for the hidden fire. You need to be cautious of laying hot materials on top of the hose. There have been numerous instances where a fireman has either been trapped or killed inside of a building because at some point something hot fell on top of their hose line, burnt through the hose line, and then the hose line failed and they had no water at the nozzle. So we really need to protect your hose lines from thermal damage. So going on with that, to prevent thermal damage, just be cautious of where the hose line's at within the building. Also be cautious even with your 5-inch supply line. So making sure that your hose lines are not too close to the exhaust of the apparatus. If they spend too much time laying on the hot pavement, could damage a fire hose. One of the biggest things, though, even with thermal damage, is also just the constant dragging the hose lines around corners and across different materials. So as I said before, just to review, be cautious. And the thing is, be cautious of the hose line getting too close to the exhaust, too close to hot vehicles. This is one of the issues where they have with people running over a hose line. So you think about how hot the exhaust could be on a small car. Once it drives over the hose line, it may get caught on the hose line and it sits there, and the hot from the vehicle is actually touching the hose line. Hose line damage may also occur due to organic damage. So this would be from mildew. This is not as big of an issue as it used to be. So we've moved away from using 100% cotton jacketed hose. So the fibers that are used now for the construction of hose lines are a little more forgiving as far as mildew. But for us, a big thing we want to do is anytime a piece of hose is used, we want to bring it back to the fire station. We want to hang it and at least dry it. So there'll be times you may wonder why we bring hose back to the station. It is not dirty or soiled, but it's just wet. We still want to make sure it's dried and cleaned off before we pack it on the apparatus. So any of the hose that we wash within the fire station, it's going to get hung up to dry. You may experience where a hose may be susceptible to some sort of chemical damage. So the chemical damage may be vapors or off-gassing of chemicals either used at the scene or present at the scene. Hose may be damaged, if it's used at a hazardous materials incident. Now this is something that is part of the job, so it's something that we we planned for. We can't kind of always change our operations just because of the potential for ruining a piece of hose. But it's something you need to think about, that at the end of the incident, looking at what occurred at that incident, maybe that hose may be taken out of service, or it may be washed and still not placed back in service. And just a note here about runoff from fires. Could either be a building fire or a chemical incident. We need to watch out for what type of chemicals that hose has been susceptible to. And again, that needs marked, or one of the officers of the company needs notified. To prevent chemical damage, so we're going to scrub the hose thoroughly for one. So if it has acid contacts, baking soda and water may be used for that. We use pretty much a general cleaning agent to wash our hose. Okay, so you wash it, scrub it with a little bit of soap in a scrub bucket, scrub the hose, hose it off, and then hang it to dry. All right, so that'll be just moving on to the care and maintenance of hose. So we're going to review the washing of hose lines, different drying methods we're going to use within the fire station, and then how we're going to store our hose lines. So for care and maintenance, you'll see on the picture here, this is an actual hose washer and a cart that we use within the Alpha Fire Company. This hose washer is located in the hose or the gear room of the main station. The way this operates, so you're gonna fill the drum, or fill the wash bucket type design at the far left side of it, or the back side. You're gonna put some soap and water in there. You're gonna submerge the hose lines and let them soak for a little bit. And then you're going to open the door on the side, and you're going to see there's at least, I believe, 3 sets of rollers in there. You're going to feed the hose through the rollers, which has a drive motor to it. And somebody's going to stand there and operate the system. It's going to pull the hose through. It's going to wash the hose. And then we'll either roll it on the rolling cart stand there beside it, or we'll just lay it on the ground and then take it over to the racks on the mezzanine, and then hang the hose to dry. So the other options, you don't always have to bring out the hose washer. We'll usually use the hose washer if we have multiple pieces of hose to wash. If you go to a small fire, maybe a car fire, you may just lay the hose within the station, use a bucket with soapy water, a scrub brush, and then scrub the hose laying across the station floor, and then hang it to dry when you're done. So here's a picture of the hose accordion styled up through the center of the engine bay. This is one of the ways that we can dry hose within the station. I believe this may have been prior to us, or Captain Eckerode, designing and installing the hose racks that you'll see against the mezzanine. Hanging the hose to dry is going to be the fastest, most efficient way to hang the hose. Also, as new members, or as all members of the fire company, if you see a hose hanging and it's been a few days and the hose dry, then it's time to pull the hose off the rack, lay it out, roll it, and put it back on the hose rack. So the storage of hose lines are going to be stored on this rack. You're going to find this rack is going to be each of the 3 stations. So as this thing, the downtown station, but each of the 3 stations do have a hose rack just like this. It does give you options as far as what hose we have stored at each of the stations. So each station should have at least 1 or 2 sections of 5-inch hose, a section or 2 of 2.5-inch hose, a section or 2 or 3-inch hose, and then maybe 3 or 4 sections of 1 3/4. For some reason, you're at a station, you're trying to pack hose, and you don't have enough hose, contact one of the officers or contact equipment technician, and they should be able to supply you with a piece of hose or enough hose you're going to need to get the job done. So don't think that if there's not enough hose on a rack that you can't get it from anywhere else. We can move it from station to station to take care of that need. Okay, so now we're going to move on to different hose loads used by the Alpha Fire Company. So with that, there are really 4 main hose lines, or actually 5 main hose lines used. So we'll use the modified Minuteman load, which is going to be used for the cross lays and the high-rise packs. We're going to use the Minuteman load for the 2.5 attack line and also the leader line. So both of those come off the back of the apparatus. The cross lays come off the middle of the apparatus. We're going to use the triple pack flat load, which will be off the front bumper. A modified flat load will also be on the crosslay. And then the flat load will be used for the 3-inch supply line and the 5-inch supply line. Okay, so as a review, modified Minuteman, a Minuteman load, a triple pack, and a flat load. All right, and you'll go over each of these. So I'm going to show you, or we're going to talk about them a little bit. I'm going to show you a video on how they are deployed. And then during your practical training, you'll work with both loading these hose lines on the apparatus and then deploying them multiple times. All right, so you'll see a modified Minuteman. Okay, so this one is split into 2 shoulder loads. So if you look at it, on the right side will be a 100-foot shoulder load. It's going to have the nozzle on the bottom. That's on the right side. And then to the left, there will be another 100-foot stack of hose. When you deploy this, the first line that you're going to take off will be the nozzle section, or the nozzle, 900 feet a section. And then the backup person will take off the other section. So for packing the Minuteman load, we're going to start with a flat load on one side of the crosslay bed. The loop is placed between the second Dutchman, or the second fold, and the middle of the load. So this is kind of, could be hard to describe. We'll go over this in your hands-on practical training. But you're going to start out with one small loop, and then there'll be a large loop on top of that, what's can be also referred to as the pull loop, and then you'll make your way up through with a stack. Again, I'm sorry, it's kind of hard to describe this, but it's going to make a lot more sense whenever you actually do it in your training. The idea of this is the pull loop is going to help you pull the hose out of the hose bed and place it on your shoulder. So you want to make sure that every section of hose is going to be pulled off as a stack, has some sort of pull loop with it. So you'll see they finished up, or they're finishing up the left side, will be a 100-foot stack of hose. And now they're starting on the right side, which will start with the nozzle at the bottom. We also, for our department, we wrap the nozzle with hose. This just makes it, somewhat a little bit easier to grab a hold of, or to hold on to when you pull it out of the hose tray. Also, it does protect the end of the nozzle. From this point, then you're going to stack the rest of the hose up and make a final connection at the top. So for pulling the Minuteman hose load, the nozzle person pulls the shoulder load from the crosslay and places the load evenly over their shoulder. So this is roughly 5 feet long. So you should have about 2.5 feet in the front, 2.5 feet in the back. And as we said, you want to try to get it, actually maybe closer to 6 feet total. But you want to have this evenly placed on your shoulder. It should be in a position where you shouldn't have to hold onto it with a hand, because you may be carrying other tools with you. So you want to make sure you get this evenly on your shoulder. Now, if you're going to do this as a one person, so you'll see that the firefighter has the first stack of hose on the right shoulder. They turn around with their left hand. Now they reach up, they grab the other pull loop, and they pull the other 100 feet onto the ground. The first 100 feet of hose remains on their shoulder. Now they use their left hand. Once the hose is on the ground, they'll reach down, they'll grab another section of hose, or they'll look for a coupler, or at least the middle of the hose, and they'll start deploying it. The last piece of hose that should ever come off your shoulder should be the section, or should come off your shoulder, is going to be what's on your shoulder. I'm sorry. You need to keep that on your shoulder as long as you can, getting close to the point of deployment as possible.
You can just keep going. Yeah, keep going straight with it.
Every month just to get good practice. You just get rusty as hell.
Well, I didn't want to say every month because I didn't want to piss them.
I would have pissed me off. I would have said every month. It's really not a bad thing to do. Jump right.
The high-rise packs are also a modified Minuteman load, so you'll go over this when your hands-on practical training. It's much the same as what you're going to see whenever you pack the hose lines in the crosslay. Okay, this is just a hose pack used to deploy into a building, so it's not going to be connected to the apparatus to start with. The benefit of this is just gives you some mobility. Now, generally for us, the high-rise packs are going to be 150 feet of hose. So this is where I tell you that our company does have 50, 75, and 100-foot sections. So a crosslay on the apparatus uses two 100-foot sections of hose. When you deploy or whenever you situate a high-rise pack, that'll use two 75-foot sections of hose, ultimately ending with a 150-foot section of hose. Okay. All right, so for a Minuteman load, or a basic Minuteman load, this will be used for the 2.5 and 3 inch leader lines, or 2.5 inch attack line and 3 inch leader line on the back of the engines. And you'll go over that in your training. The other kind of different crosslay we use is going to be a modified flat load. So you'll see on each of the apparatus, the first two crosslays, one comes off the driver's side, one comes off the passenger side. is going to be a modified Minuteman load. Then the third cross lay is going to be a modified flat load. The benefit of using the flat load with this, the nozzle is going to come off of either side of the apparatus. It's not standard to only coming off of one side. This is generally used for the extra line, or if you need to put a third line in service, or you need something with just a few more options, you may choose to use the flat load compared to using one of the Minuteman loads. Okay. The loops for this hose load are going to be placed so it can be easily deployed by one firefighter. Okay, so that's one of the benefits of this one, where the modified Minuteman load can be used with either one or two firefighters. This one is designed to truly be deployed with just one firefighter. So to start with this, there are two loops that are going to be placed on both sides of the load. Okay, and then as you work your way up through, approximately a third of the way up will be one loop, and then 2/3 of the way up, or closer to the top of the stack, will be the other loop. So you'll learn more about this when you actually do it in your hands-on training. I just want you to understand that not every cross lay on the apparatus is going to be a modified Minuteman load. We will also use a flat load, which is a very useful hose load. Whenever you're deploying the modified flat load, as you can tell, so this firefighter positions himself that they start with their right hand. They first put their hand through the upper loop, and then their hand goes from the upper loop down through to the lower loop, and then they step away from the apparatus. While they're up in this position, if they can, they're going to reach up with their left hand and grab a hold of the nozzle. So as they step away from the apparatus, their left hand should be holding onto the nozzle. Their right arm should have 2 loops of hose. The highest loop of hose, which would be the one on the right side, is closer to their elbow. The lower loop of hose will be on the left side there, will be closer to their wrist. Okay, so you'll see them moving away from the apparatus, pulling 2 sections of hose and a nozzle away from the unit. The triple pack line is used on the front bumper of the apparatus. This is generally used for trash fires or car fires. The benefit of this line, again, is going to be a one-person deployment. When you deploy this hose line, you're going to move away from the apparatus until the hose is all flaked out. You're going to learn in your hands-on training. This is also a very useful maneuverable hose line, and it's pretty easy to pack once you get onto it. So it really makes a large Z with your hose into three sections, and then it gets packed together as one unit. And you'll see that they're starting to pack the triple pack. So the fluids are into thirds or sectioned into thirds and then laid on top of itself. Once everything is folded into 3 sections, then it's accordion loaded into the hose tray on the front of the bumper. You'll see the bottom picture of whenever you're deploying this triple pack hose. All you're going to do is hold on to the nozzle and the hose that it's attached to, and you're going to walk forward away from the apparatus until all the hose is out of the hose tray. Flat loads are used for LDH supply line and also the 3-inch dead load. Okay, so a flat load is a general hose load used for supply hose. And this is something you'll go over this operation in your hands-on training. So here are two good books. If you have a chance to somehow get a hold of these, they just go over some operations when stretching attack lines, and again, one on the right side is advanced operations and attack line deployment. There are also a multitude of videos and books on this subject. This is really the bread and butter of fireground engine company operations. So you got to be able to efficiently and effectively deploy the hose line on your apparatus, which is going to help you get the water from the apparatus, through the hose to your nozzle, and then be able to deploy it onto the fire. So I appreciate your time going over this short slide set with me. I'm just going to prepare you for your hands-on operations in your engine company training class. Again, in your training class, you'll have time. You're going to go through the deployment and repacking of each of these hose loads. I believe you may have also went over some of the flat loads during your initial hydrant training, so that'll just be worked into the next operations. Again, if you have any questions, contact your engine captain or the engine lieutenants, and please complete the quiz that goes along with this training program. Again, thank you for your time.